Mr Farage.
Thank you. It's 40 years since the BBC debated this great question. The one thing that has remained the same, of course, is David Dimbleby. Well, almost. But apart from that, everything's changed, because in those days we were asked to stay part of a common market. It was all about trade, if you remember. Well, it wasn't true. And we find ourselves today part of a political union. We find most of our laws being made somewhere else. We find it's all rather expensive. And we have open-door immigration. Indeed, if you put to a referendum today, would we join that union? Overwhelmingly, we would say no.
Tonight I'm going to ask you to remember just one thing. If it sounds too good to be true, then it probably is. You've just heard it from Nigel Farage. You'll hear it from him all evening. He'll say that we can quit the European Union, we can isolate ourselves in the world, and still protect jobs, still protect trade, still punch above our weight. That we can have all the good things of being in Europe without actually being in Europe. It's a dangerous con.
We have given false hope to those Western Ukrainians. And did you see them with their EU flags and their banners? They actually toppled a democratically elected leader. Yes, I know Ukraine's corrupt. I know he wasn't perfect, but they toppled a leader. And I do not want to be part of an emerging expansionist EU foreign policy. I think it'll be a danger to peace.
Nick Clegg.
Well, I have to say, listening to that, it seems to me if I'm the leader of the party of in, Nigel Farage is the leader of Putin. And it's just extraordinary that his loathing of the European Union is so all-consuming that he is now seeking to justify and defend the actions of a man, Vladimir Putin, who, Ukraine is one thing. Look what's happening in Syria. He is the only man on the planet who, with one telephone call to President Assad, the most brutal dictator in the world, could actually help bring the participants to that awful, awful conflict to the negotiating table. There are 200 people dying in Syria, being mowed down in Syria, being killed in Syria every single day, and Nigel Farage says he admires the way that Vladimir Putin has played, as if it's a game, the terrible humanitarian catastrophe in Syria. He admires how Vladimir Putin has behaved there. That is why I think Nigel Farage's position is absolutely indefensible.
Well, Nick, you, as Deputy Prime Minister, were happy to go and bomb Libya. You did that, and 3.5 years on, the situation in Libya is worse than it was.
Nigel Farage doesn't want to work with the Americans. He doesn't want to work with the rest of Europe. He only wants to side with Vladimir Putin, who's the only man, as I say, with one telephone call, who could bring this bloody conflict to an end.
So, Nick,
this country, Nick, has had enough of getting involved in endless foreign wars.
But these are dangerous.
Whether it's you doing it or anybody else doing it, and there is no evidence. Hang on. There is no evidence that our military intervention in these countries is making life better. As I say, with you as Deputy Prime Minister,
that's not the question.
With you as Deputy Prime Minister, we bombed Libya, and it's worse now than it was then. And the answer to Charles's question is, I don't want to be part of a European foreign policy.
This is a dangerous fantasy. The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true. The problem with people like Nigel Farage is they swing at windmills. They see conspiracies everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if Nigel Farage soon tells us that the moon landing was a fake, that Barack Obama isn't American, that Elvis isn't dead. You know, it is not going to happen.
Why do you deny your union?
He claimed last week that 485 million people were going to vacate the whole of the rest of the European continent and turn up in Britain, leaving no human habitation left in the rest of Europe. It's as silly as me saying that 5 million people living in Scotland might all move to Orpington next Tuesday.
Right,
it isn't going to happen.
Nigel Farage.
Nick, when are you going to start confronting a few simple truths and stop twisting the facts the way you did last week and you're doing this week?
Of course there are problems in some parts of the country where you get a big change in the local population. But on the whole, Nigel Farage says he basically doesn't like modern Britain. I love the diversity and the compassion and the outward-facing values of modern Britain. And I think we should be celebrating that, not denigrating it, and not trying to sort of turn the clock back. Not turning the clock back on this issue, not turning the clock back, as Nigel Farage has done by saying that people who are gay are not allowed to get married, not turning the clock back on women's rights. Nigel Farage has said that women are worth far less in the workplace if they want to have children, not turning the clock back by saying that climate change is some conspiracy. Let's go with a grain of what modern Britain is, not pretend that we somehow can turn the clock back to some 19th century bygone age which simply doesn't exist anymore.
But Nick, it is the duty of government to make sure that its own citizens have got the best chance for advancement that is possible. I mentioned the white working class. I could, of course, in London, have mentioned the Afro-Caribbean community, 50% of whose youngsters are currently unemployed. I can understand why big business supports you, because what you've done is given us a cheap labour economy.
Small businesses.
Now, that's been very good for big business, been very good for rich people to take on servants, but it has not been good for the people at the bottom of society. And we need to find a way to give people at the bottom of society and to give our young people jobs. And we will not do that with an open-door immigration policy to southern and eastern Europe.
It's all very well.
That is about putting Britain and British people first. Nick, and I tell you what, in the northwest of England, we are sitting on a shale gas field that is absolutely huge. If we do what the Americans have done, we can bring down the price of energy by nearly 50%. And I would say, let's not look a gift horse in the mouth. Scrap wind energy, scrap the subsidies, scrap the money for the rich landowners. Let's get fracking in the short term, and let's make sure we can give industry and ordinary people value for money.
Okay. Nick, I'm going to move on because I'm trying to keep an even balance between the two of you, and you slightly have the edge in, I was going to say verbosity. I don't mean that.
I tell you what I don't believe in. I don't believe in the dishonesty in saying to the British people that we can turn the clock back. What next?
No, are you going to say
we should return to the gold standard?
No, we're going
or a pre-decimal currency?
This is the 21st century.
Or maybe get W.G. Grace to open the batting for England again. This is the 21st century. Yeah. It's not the 19th century. Now, Nigel Farage, I've heard this many, many times, and you'll hear it this evening, says that we should be like Switzerland or Norway. Let's just think about that for a minute. Switzerland and Norway have to pay into the European Union coffers. They have to obey all European Union laws. That's why they call it fax democracy in Norway. Everything gets decided by everybody else in Brussels. They then have to transpose it into law in Oslo. They have no British MEPs, no Norwegian or Swiss MEPs or commissioners. They have no passport checks. They have no power whatsoever. All the rules are made by foreigners. Utter powerlessness. That is how perverse the patriotism of Nigel Farage has become, that he now advocates that we become like two countries that have less power than we do in the world's largest economy.
Nick Farage.
No, it's Nigel, honestly.
Nigel, sorry.
I know you're trying not to agree with either Nick, but...
I tried to disagree with both of you.
It's great that we're actually at last, after 40 years, debating the issue. But what really matters at the end of the day isn't what I think, or what Nick thinks, what the chairman thinks, or you think. It's what the British public think, and they should be given a free and fair referendum and the opportunity to express that. But the problem is that, the elite club of career politicians and big businesses don't want you to have a say. You know why? Because they think you might give the wrong answer. They think you might say, no, we'd rather govern our own country.
I've been very clear, I've had the same view all the time, that in a parliamentary democracy such as ours, you don't have a referendum every time there's a little tweak or change or an amendment.
Right then, wasn't it?
No, because in 2008, when that leaflet was issued, let's be absolutely clear, we were being asked as a country to ratify something called the Lisbon Treaty. It was a big rewriting of the rules. That is when you should have a referendum. I think if we were to have a referendum right now or next week, I think given that we're at such a delicate stage of our economic recovery, which is so important, I think that would be put at peril. I'm not prepared to do that, but we've put into law the guarantee there'll be a referendum when the rules change again.
Hold on, we must move on.
Let's take back control of our country. Let's control our borders and have a proper immigration policy. Let's stop giving away £55 million a day as a membership fee to a club that we don't need to be a part of. Let's re-embrace the big world, the 21st century global world. Let's strike trade deals with India, New Zealand, all of those emerging, doing superbly parts of the world. Let's free ourselves up. And in doing so, let's give an example to the rest of Europe. I know the people are behind this, and I would urge people, come and join the People's Army. Let's topple the establishment who've led us to this mess.
Then there are those of us who believe and love modern Britain as it is today, compassionate, diverse, outward-facing, who understand that there are complexities and challenges in the modern world, but who also understand that by working with other countries, we deal with those challenges and we make Britain richer, stronger and safer. In short, real remedies for the way that the world is today, not dangerous fantasies about a bygone world that no longer exists. And that is why I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we remain part of the European Union, because that is how we protect the Britain that we love.